I mean, like, in a perfect world, your kid will be like, I want to solve this problem and I can't figure it out. And you can be like, algebra.
Yeah.
Chefs normally don't follow recipes very carefully or very much at all. They just, can go into a kitchen and, they have their ingredients and they can prepare something because they understand how the ingredients work. I think learning it at like a profound level is always going to be better than learning it at a kind of surface memorization of rules level. And so I guess what I'm saying is, even if you have to teach to a test, you can still teach real math to a test.
Hello and welcome to the Making Mathematicians podcast. I'm Zach and I'm here with my brother Alec and my sister Cass. We're the creators of Making Mathematicians. It's an online course that shows homeschool parents how to learn and teach real math. Now, real math is what mathematicians do. Real math is a creative, self-expressive, open-ended exploration of whatever the imagination can grab a hold of. You learn real math the same way you learn art, science, literature, or history. You can't learn real math from a math curriculum. In this podcast, we're going to be answering your questions about how to learn and teach real math. If you'd like to learn more, check out the complete Making Mathematicians course at makingmathematicians.org.
Today's question comes from Victoria, and she asks, I want to give my children the freedom to learn real math, but they still have to pass evaluation tests every year. It's like a legal requirement. How do I make sure they can pass their evaluations without forcing them to do curriculum math in order to do that and falling into the whole cycle and everything? So, what are your thoughts?
I think this is a very important question.
Yeah.
And we often talk about college exams or SATs, ACTs, but those are all very far away. And once your child has this super solid foundation of math, they can do whatever they want in the last, month or two leading up to these tests and be totally ready and do the test prep book or whatever and be fine. But yeah, I think it's really important to ask, well, what do I do about the looming test at the end of the year for my 7-year-old or my 10-year-old, or how do I keep homeschooling them if I can't show some evaluator or some government official?
No, I think that's a good point. Because in the course we talk about this. We have a whole lesson on like standardized tests and the way that you can prepare for it. Because I think this is like, even when we were preparing the course, it was obvious that this was going to be like every bit of feedback we got, like this was something that came up really early on. And it's true that when I was planning for the course and when we were discussing things, there was definitely a focus on these standardized tests, like these college entrance exams was kind of the main focus. I don't think the answer to how to prepare for those is fundamentally different from the end of year evaluations. And I think part of the reason we focus on those is because they're a lot more like standard for everybody, like different jurisdictions, different states or whatever have different rules for these evaluations. Broadly speaking, the principles are going to be the same. I think the problem is that in the course and in this podcast, we often really like strongly contrast like real math with curriculum math. And I don't think it's quite like that. It's more like real math contains everything that is mathy in curriculum math.
Well, it's not like real math is like it's not like the opposite of curriculum math. Another analogy that you gave in the course is you talk about like if you're playing basketball. Like if real math is playing basketball, curriculum math might be just like doing one or two drills over and over again. Like that is part of basketball, but it's a really small part.
Right.
And so
right.
like I think it is important to like they're not like opposite. It's not like doing real math means you're getting worse at curriculum math.
Yeah. No, I think specifically talking about standardized tests in the course, we use lots of analogies in the course because what we were explaining is sort of outside of people's experience, so you have to use analogies to bring it in.
It's both outside of people's experience with math, but it's very similar to
people's
people's experiences with art and
exactly.
music and so many other arts and crafts.
Hence the reliance on analogies. But I think specifically the analogy we used when talking about standardized tests was that of a chef. Chefs normally don't follow recipes very carefully or very much at all. They just, can go into a kitchen and, they have their ingredients and they can prepare something because they understand how the ingredients work and they understand how cooking works. I do not in
My
any way.
brother-in-law is a chef, and he can taste something and be like, "Oh, it needs more of this and
Yeah,
this,"
yeah, no.
and then it magically transform the dish.
Exactly. Whereas I cannot do that. But I think that's the thing. Like,
Saved many a meal.
just because they don't follow recipes doesn't mean that they can't follow recipes. I think was the idea of that analogy. And in the same way, if you're studying real math, it doesn't follow that you won't be able to do curriculum math. In a way, it'll become a lot easier. Like I said in the course, I think they use the example of dividing by 0, right? I said, try to divide by 0 if you want to. That's like a perfectly legitimate thing to try to do, or try to figure out how to do when you're studying math. And that doesn't mean that when you get to a test, you'll be like, wait, am I supposed to try to divide by 0 here? Like, no, because if you try to divide by 0, and if you try to figure out how that works or how that doesn't work, then when you run into that on a standardized test, it's going to be really clear to you. Like, it's not like a rule that you had to memorize at some point. It's going to be something that's, like, ingrained in your head. And you're like, oh, like, I know I can't do that here because it wouldn't make any sense. Whereas otherwise you wouldn't. So anyway, I think there's like, speaking at kind of this big picture level, I think that's kind of the solution. Like, if you're studying like real math, you're not going to have that much trouble picking up curriculum math. As far as kind of zooming in to specific cases, it's a little trickier, obviously, because, again, especially with kind of these yearly evaluations or whatever the requirements can be, and some requirements might be like strangely specific. Like the way curriculum math works in the school system now, it's like almost bizarrely specific. Like, you can almost narrow down the week when somebody is going to learn something when they're 14 and a half years old. Right before the Christmas break, they're going to like learn this principle. It's almost crazily precise, which is a whole issue in and of itself. Like, there's no way you can be creative or self-expressive or explore new avenues or new interests in a system.
Heaven help you if you get behind.
Oh yeah. The whole idea of like being behind in math is so bizarre. It's like being behind in art or being ahead in like sports. It's just like weird. Even like being like ahead or behind in science. Like, I think there are school standards for like things you should know at certain ages, but like everyone realizes that there's not like a single science track and everyone has to, like, there isn't this idea. And the way that gets imported into math, and just like in science, I mean, it's easier to learn more difficult complex ideas or more complex ideas after you learn the simple ones. It's the same thing with math. It's the same thing with any field. Yeah, I mean, the big problem with tests is that it does, like all kind of like formal systems of control, they kind of destroy kind of the informal incentives. People should do math if people want to get good at math, if people want to enjoy math, then they have to kind of do it for its own sake. It has to be like autotelic, right? It has to be its own good. And when you impose these external incentives, you kind of destroy the kind of internal incentive. This is the big problem with tests, and a big problem obviously with all kinds of education and lots of other aspects of life. But this is kind of the thing you have to look out for, that as soon as you start teaching for the test or for the evaluation, it becomes really easy for those incentives to kind of overwhelm your internal incentives, just because they're so much more aggressive. And again, this is something we talk about in the course, but these external things, especially when they can like be measured, especially when there's an enormous federal apparatus trying to enforce them on you, it's so easy for them to overwhelm kind of this nascent curiosity that we all just like have naturally inside of ourselves. And so I think, like, I just think of that, like, curiosity has to be fed, it has to be taken care of, and curiosity is powerful and it's robust and it'll keep bouncing back. But I mean, especially in kids, it's still young and delicate and it can be crushed. So I always worry when like talking about like preparing for tests. But I do think there's some things. I mean, like, understanding the material at like a deep and profound level, that's gonna help you with tests.
Right, 100%.
Yeah. Right? Like, every time.
Well, and I also think it's really important that will give you so much confidence going into the test, and that's half the battle.
Yeah, no,
just thinking about, I've tutored overseas, like English as a second language, tutored older students for taking some of these college entry English
Yeah.
English college entry tests, and they were horrible tests. They were the worst tests I've ever seen. And I went to college, so but they're full of trick questions and things that, as an English major and a native English speaker, it was just like, okay, well, either all of these are wrong or there's multiple correct options or whatever.
Right. The sort of like trying to guess what they want, right?
Right, exactly. And so the biggest thing that, over teaching this a couple times that I saw help students was just to completely, specifically for the test, it was like, no, this isn't about English at all. This is just about you getting the skills to take the test feeling confident, like to go in confidently. So we're gonna talk, we're gonna have conversations in English and build your confidence that you can speak English. And then we're going to give you the test-taking skills you need.
Yeah.
And so between the confidence and the test-taking skills, they would walk in there and they do really well.
Mm-hmm. I guess, that was my question, is almost like, would it be more helpful, do you think, for parents to just like separate the two? Just be like, we're going to learn math, and then also we're going to learn the things we need to learn for the evaluation. And like, just kind of, don't let that get too confused with math and like ruin or taint math.
Keep them very distinct.
Yeah, I don't want to lay down any like hard and fast rules because it's going to depend. But I was going to say, I think like overall, I mean, understanding math is going to help to some extent, no matter how bad the test is. But also I think learning like what you're describing, like learning test taking skills, and I think part of that is being able to like develop confidence and be able to kind of like manage the stress of being in a test. Mm-hmm. Being able to kind of like see the bigger picture and like what am I trying to say? Like pace yourself, keep your energy up, you know what I mean? All these sorts of things. I mean, they're good testing skills. They're also just kind of good life skills to develop. Just being able to kind of keep your cool in a stressful situation. So I don't think there's anything wrong with like teaching people how to take tests. Like I think those are useful skills, even if it's weird that tests are testing for that and not for the thing that they're claiming to test for. So I think that's all worthwhile. Like I said, when I was a kid, I was able to do well in these tests because, I came at it with a certain attitude and I had
you were almost aggressive.
Yeah, exactly. I remember
they were aggressive towards you. You came right back at them.
When I had difficult tests, I remember in college, I would reward myself beforehand for doing so well in the test I was about to take. I was like, I am so pumped to take. But I don't know. Everyone has their own little rituals and their own little ways of doing it. So I think
ideally you don't want your child to be antagonistic towards their evaluator.
I mean, it depends. No. So anyway, I think like I said, it depends because the other aspect of taking a test is understanding the specific test. And in the case of these big standardized tests for these college entrance exams, for example, there's a huge amount of literature and resources to understand exactly how those tests work. And I definitely recommend, if you're taking one of those, to take the time to pick up some of these resources, these study guides or whatever, test prep. There's a whole industry devoted to this. And I think it's definitely worthwhile if getting a good score on these tests is important to you to delve into all of that. And it's probably the same with your evaluations. I mean, depending on the jurisdiction you're in, that might be a standardized test that you can learn about beforehand and prepare for. That might be getting to know the teacher who's going to evaluate and just getting an idea of the sort of expectations they have. So I think that's all. I think that's all useful. I guess what I would say is that a lot of taking tests is these sort of extrinsic things to the content itself.
Right.
But then when it comes to learning the content itself, I think learning it at like a profound level is always going to be better than learning it at a kind of surface memorization of rules level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, going back to the analogy of like the chef, like a chef who really understands how heat affects different types of like food and understands like what different spices do and what salt does to the the protein makeup of the food will obviously be able to like understand a recipe that requires certain things going in at different times. They won't be like as concerned with like just following the steps perfectly in order, and they'll be like, oh, obviously you have to do this first and do that because that has to react or whatever.
Yeah. And then I mean, if you have to like learn something really specific for a test, you have to know algorithms for this test, or no logarithms, I was going to say, for this test, you can do that. But even that, I mean, you can still learn logarithms in their historical context.
And
or in
memorization's only going to get you so far, because the moment
Yeah.
something deviates from what you've practiced, it's going to throw your whole game
Yeah.
off.
Well, I mean, for instance, when I was a teenager, I learned these rules of how logarithms work, and I memorized them, and I had a good memory, so I was able to memorize them and pass tests, and then I promptly forgot them. And then, like, years later, when I started studying real math, like, the whole point of logarithms is that they follow these rules, and that's what makes them interesting. And, seeing them sort of historically, the purpose of logarithms historically, the reasons they were developed, is because they follow specific rules and the way that they relate to exponents and stuff like that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's why they were and understanding that in that historical context, now I know these rules off the top of my head. And if I don't have them memorized, I can just sort of think through how they must be, because that was the whole point of logarithms. And so I guess what I'm saying is, even if you have to teach to a test, you can still teach real math to a test.
Right.
That's not ideal.
Well, that was
But
gonna.
it's
That
still-
kind of goes
it's
into.
still
I had kind of a follow up question, and I think you kind of answered it. But I was like, what if, more specifically, a parent might be like, okay, I want them to do math. They're asking questions. They're reading books, but maybe they're learning. They're working on this particular thing, and then the test is gonna ask them about algebra, and we haven't even touched on that. And so maybe you're saying just like, know that at some point they're gonna be asked about algebra, so try to look at the history of that and look at what real mathematicians have done and problems that involve that, instead of just being like, here's a function, let's do this 1,000 times.
Yeah, no. I mean, in a perfect world, your kid will be like, I want to solve this problem and I can't figure it out. And you can be like, algebra.
Yeah. No, and that would be the optimal way to do that.
Well, that might not happen. You might be like, okay, for a test, you need algebra. And so, but there's a history to algebra, and there's a logic to it, and there's, there are problems that can be solved with it, even really simple problems that your kids could, potentially solve on their own.
I mean, I do feel like so much of what we talk about, the difference between real math and curriculum math, is it's kind of like curriculum math is going at it backwards, or
Yeah, right.
I feel like there's a it's going down head, nose before toe.
It's with the cart before the horse.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
what you're
so
going
bad
for.
with idioms. So it's like curriculum math's like putting the cart before the horse. Yeah, algebra is an awesome tool
Yeah.
that you can use to figure some things out. And in the course, a couple times you use algebra, and it's funny. I remember when you used it, you're like, for some people, don't panic, but for some people, they love it. And so it's just a tool that you can use.
Yeah, and it's a great, powerful tool. Mathematicians love algebra.
And so if you're trying to teach your kids real math and they're working on problems, then you can introduce algebra as a tool to use in the problems that they want to solve. And then down the road, they'll have a standardized test, and they'll be like, oh, I know this.
Yeah, no. I mean, virtually everything in curriculum math is actual math, right? It's just not the order of operation. I don't know who came up with that. But if you don't know whether you should add or multiply, put parentheses in there. And just, that's what real mathematicians do. What is it, PEMDAS or what? Anyway, I had to memorize all these things, and it turns out that's kind of goofy. But for the most part, everything in curriculum math is also the case in real math. I mean, they don't just make it up, right?
Yeah.
So which means though that you can learn almost all that stuff from
Real
a
math.
real interesting, meaningful perspective, right?
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
So anyway, I think it's possible.
And I have one more thought on that. We've been talking a lot about prepping your kids, but I do think a big part of answering this question is similar to answer some of the other questions we've answered already in the podcast. But maybe start with you as the parent.
Yeah.
If you're scared for your kid to take it, I don't know if parents out there are. I'm the kind of person who would be nervous about my kid taking a test. And maybe you reevaluate that. Can you build confidence in your child? Because if you're nervous, they're probably going to be nervous too. And
Unless they also aggressively want to beat your expectations, but then you have a whole other problem.
in fact, I actually feel like you being such a, whatever you were as a child, helped.
A nerd. Is the word she's looking for.
Being such a nerd showed kind of our mom that she didn't have to worry about, we would get it and we would figure things out. And then
What a
we
positive spin.
We didn't
on our
quite as
child.
much.
You being the guinea pig.
You were the guinea pig, and you saved the rest of us. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know if that's
But no, I think that if a parent understands that there are simple things you can do to be better at taking tests, if that's what you're really worried about, and then just relax and focus on the real math and focus on your experience learning it, your experience working on it with your child, your relationship, all that stuff. That will
Yeah.
And also, like you said, I think if a kid really learns to like love math and is working on problems that are complicated just for fun, like they're probably gonna learn so much faster than like the one principle a week done 1,000 times each day, and you know what I mean?
No,
Like,
it's the same with reading, and I think a lot of homeschool kids get this with reading. Like homeschool kids, I think test really well on reading comprehension, and it's not because they're drilling vocab all the time.
Yeah.
Right? It's because they're just reading a lot. And I think it's the same with math. Like you can do well on math tests by doing real math. Like you don't have to like drill kind of these math memorization things. And you can do math exercises. They're kind of fun. I mean, it's like it's like people do Sudokus for fun.
yeah.
right.
Right? You can also...
You like solve a
And you
Rubik's
do
Cube,
enough of
even
them,
though
and
it's
your
just fun.
brain just starts to immediately see the patterns. and it's great. It's a lot of
So I
fun.
mean, like you could do those exercises for fun as well, and it doesn't hurt to practice that, and it probably does help you solve some real problems. But yeah, I mean, if you're studying math in the same way, if you're reading a lot, you'll be good at reading comprehension. If you do a lot of math, you'll be good at like these math exercises or whatever they.
How many times
they
can we
ask you
say
to do.
this?
Yeah, no, it's
Real math will help you.
Yeah, no, I like it's really easy to fall into this idea of a dichotomy, but I don't think it's there. Just don't let tests kind of override and crush their native curiosity. So anyway.
Thank you for listening to the Making Mathematicians podcast. We hope our discussion has helped or inspired you in your effort to learn and teach real math. If you have a question you'd like to ask us, please leave a comment or email podcast@makingmathematicians.org. If you'd like to learn more, check out the complete Making Mathematicians course at makingmathematicians.org.